Okay, I'm going to show you how to do the clapping duet in this video. Here's the thing about the clapping duet. It is an exercise to help you improve your ability to stay with the metronome. So you have to use the metronome. You can't skip that part. So if you're doing part one, the first step is to turn on the metronome. The next step is to count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. It's the pattern. The main pattern is just one measure of 4/4, and as you count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, you're going to lightly clap the rhythm. Your focus is just to be exactly with the metronome. So you want to listen very carefully, make sure that you're not in front of the metronome or behind it, but you want to try to be right on with the metronome. You just repeat that over and over until part 2 is finished. You're just basically repeating the same thing over and over again. So on the next slide, you'll hear what it sounds like. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and. Now if you're going to do part 2, it's almost the same thing. You have the same pattern, but it's slightly different because you're going to repeat it 2 or 3 times, and then you're going to do this thing called the shift measure. You just do the shift measure one time, and you go straight back to the main pattern. The shift measure is the measure where what's going to happen is it's going to shift you over 1/2 a beat, or 1/8 note. So after you are doing the main pattern, and then you do the shift measure, when you go back to the main pattern, the metronome is now going to be shifted to the off beat. This is what that's going to sound like here on the next slide. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Hopefully you could hear how the metronome was now on the offbeat after I did the shift pattern. So once part 2 does the shift pattern, then the 2 parts are now going to be offset by 1/8 note. Each time that part 2 shifts, the parts become another 1/8 note apart. So you're just moving further and further apart, and eventually what happens is the parts come back together. Here's just a little visual explanation of what it is. So after the first shift, you can see that the top part, that's part 1, when we're counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, part 2 is 1/8 note ahead of them. So when they say 1, then an 1/8 note later, part 1 says 1. And each shift that gets further apart to the next shift, you can see there are 2/8 notes. And then here we are on the next shift, they're 3/8 notes apart, then 4/8 notes apart. I think you get the picture. Eventually, the parts are going to line back up together. So you're going further and further out of phase until, boom, you're back in phase again. You're back together. And then the exercise is over. The way to practice this is first practice each part alone with the metronome. Part 1, you don't need to practice probably a lot with the metronome. I think the one you're going to need to practice is part 2, because you have to get used to the idea of sometimes the metronome is going to be clicking on the beats, sometimes it's going to be clicking on the off beats, and you want to be pretty solid with that. And be sure to clap and count lightly so that you can hear the metronome at all times. If you listen to the demonstrations again that I did a few slides back, you can hear, I think what you hear the loudest is the metronome, and the second loudest is the counting, and the third loudest is the clapping. So that's exactly how it should be. You want to hear that metronome. You want to stay with that metronome all the way through. Now, as far as putting the 2 parts together, the best way to do it is with another person, so that you can get used to hearing them count differently than you. The other way to practice it is you can practice part 2 while you're listening to this MP3. I'm going to make an MP3 later today of part 1, and I'm just going to do that main pattern over and over and over again so that you can practice part 2 and being slightly offset. And like I said, for the individual test, you're going to perform part 2 with this recorded MP3. So you want to make sure that you practice with the MP3 at least a few times so you get used to doing it with that the recorded part 1. Here's an extra credit opportunity. If you will do this exercise on video, so make a video of yourself with somebody else doing the whole exercise, I will give you some extra credit. The video has to show your faces and your hands, and I have to be able to hear the metronome, and the video has to be good, so you have to do it well. You can't stop, you can't have a lot of mistakes, you have to stay in sync with the metronome, follow all the directions. If you do all these things, I'll give you extra credit. If it's not very good, or if you missed some major part of the directions, you won't get the extra credit. And then the last thing is, if you'll just send me an email saying, yes, it's okay if you share this video with other students, I'd like to be able to show this to future students as I'm giving this assignment. This is the 3rd year I've given this assignment. If you're willing to do that, I will give you extra credit. You can get the extra credit up to 1/2 of a video assignment if you make one video. If you want to get credit for an entire video, and this might be for those people who, let's say you didn't turn in the other video assignment and it's too late to turn it in now, you can do this assignment and I will give you credit for that. What you'll have to do is do 2 videos. Once where you're performing part 1 and the other where you're performing part 2. And the stipulation is you have to do it with a different partner for each video. So that's hoping to get a few more people involved. And you have to do the exercise well. So you can't just do a bad job. You have to work on it and make it good. You can do your videos with somebody else in the class, or you might even be able to ask somebody from the sophomore class or the junior class if they would like to do it with you. Maybe you can talk them into it, or maybe they're your friend or something like that, and that's fine with me too. But you just have to, if you want extra credit for a full video assignment, you have to appear in 2 videos, once performing part 1 and another time performing part 2. All right, have a good time.